The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 141 with Katherine Roberts from Yoga for Golfers.
I always say this all the time to my baseball players. If it was up to me, I would put double bubble out of the baseball business because guys are just chomping, and it does have an impact on the nervous system.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where we know that it is your constant mission to do everything you can to find all the information that you can about getting better at this game by playing better golf, getting in better shape, increasing your physical and mental toughness, both on and off the course. And so it's our job here, or at least we feel it's our mission, to put you in touch with some of the greatest individuals in the game. That be golfers, teachers, fitness professionals, whatever it might be, people that are doing this on a regular basis, helping golfers get better by utilizing different techniques, strategies, skills, etc. And so I'm very honored to, again, for the second time, have our guest on this week, who is Katherine Roberts. And Katherine, if you don't know her, was on the show early in the 18 Strong days, in the first year of the podcast. And she is the founder of Yoga for Golfers, which has impacted so many golfers and fitness professionals in this whole realm. And so we owe a lot to Katherine. And I know that she's influenced pretty much almost everybody that's been on the show that is a fitness professional in the world of golf. So we're very fortunate to have her on. And especially in this month of May, where we're talking a lot about mobility, you would obviously imagine that having Katherine on to talk about yoga would fit right in. But we take a little bit of a different turn here. And normally when I think of mobility or flexibility, and I think you probably fall in the same boat here, we tend to think about how much movement we have and how much we can control our bodies. But we delve a little differently into our topic today about really the mind and how much intentional efforts really plays into what we do on the course, what we do in the gym. And so Katherine kind of walks us through some of the different pieces of yoga that aren't so much physical centered, but a little bit more emotional and mentally centered, in order to kind of wrap your brain around what's going on in your head when you're on the course and when you're working out or when you're doing any kind of training to improve your performance. And Katherine does this with people at the highest of levels, not just golfers, but she works with a lot of Major League Baseball teams and other professional sports and athletes, and does this with them on a very regular basis. So I'm very excited to share a little bit of a different spin on Yoga for Golfers and everything that Katherine's doing at the highest level. But before we jump into the interview with Katherine, I want to say a quick thanks to PGAtour.com, and specifically the new players pages on PGAtour.com. The pages are much cleaner to consume, and they've got a wide variety of different content, from statistics to social media and everything. So a few of the new features that they have are you can check out different achievements that each player has accomplished. They've got a scoring system, so you can keep track of their rounds each of the 4 days, and if they're playing at that time, you can kind of keep live track of the guys as they're going along. And one of the coolest pieces that I saw was the latest section, which includes most recent content, including like social media stuff, and it lays it all out in kind of a cool little feed, so you can keep track of all that all in one place for that specific player. And then you can get all the stats that you would ever dream about getting on these guys, and you can go pretty deep in the stats. So it's really cool to kind of keep track on a live basis while they're playing, and you can check it all out on your mobile device and everything. So go to PGAtour.com and be sure to check out the new players pages. All right, let's jump into our interview with the one and only Katherine Roberts. Katherine Roberts, welcome back to the 18 Strong Podcast, and thank you so much for coming on again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love chatting with you, Jeff. We always have a good time and uncover a lot of pretty cool information.
Yeah, I think we've got some interesting topics to cover today. Everybody knows that follows 18 Strong and is kind of following our Instagram and things like that. We've got our Mobility May initiative going on, which is all about, helping create awareness around the fact that golfers need to move better in order to play better golf. And most people would think that obviously you're a perfect tie-in to our Mobility May topic, but we might go a little bit of a different route here, talking about yoga, not necessarily getting so much into the specifics of the mobility stuff, the flexibility stuff, but we're going to go a little bit of a different route. But if I could, I'd like for you to maybe give your definition of what mobility is to you, because I know that there's a lot of different thoughts and practices around mobility and flexibility and things like that. How would you just tell the layperson what your definition of mobility is?
Well, I'd say my definition of mobility is enabling the body to perform in the way that you intend it to. And it's not necessarily, one specific stretch. It's looking at the entire body as a whole and looking at like chain reaction biomechanics. How does the body move? I mean, when I'm teaching yoga, my approach is based in biomechanics, not just one specific stretch or even one specific area. I think the other thing when we talk about mobility is why the word that comes to my mind is freedom. And the mobility piece for me, too, in doing what I do has a direct correlation to the mindset. How freely does your mind work? How is your mind and your self-confidence restricted by a, limiting inner dialogue or the story that you tell yourself about your ability to perform? So I look at everything from a mind-body perspective, not just the physical body.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about that, because we were kind of chatting a little bit offline here, and you were telling me, and I want to dig into this, you were telling me about the 8 limbs of yoga and the fact that there's so many different pieces to the whole, I guess, holistic approach of yoga that most of us don't think about. I mean, most people think of doing stretches and getting more flexible and moving better and getting into these crazy poses, but you were telling me that there's so much more to it that most of us don't really understand. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Well, the type of yoga that I have been trained in, that I've been teaching for over 20 years, is based in what's called the 8 limbs of yoga. And if you can think about a tree, right? So a tree, let's say a tree has these 8 limbs. Well, what's interesting to me is that of those 8 limbs, only 2 of them have to do with the physical body. One is what we call asana, which are the yoga poses, the things that people think about, a down dog, a warrior 2 pose, a tree pose, whatever the physical aspect is, that's called asana. Then the other part is what's called pranayama, and pranayama, the term, this is Sanskrit, the term pranayama refers to prana meaning life force, and yama meaning either retention or expansion. So we use different types of breathing strategies to elicit a certain neurological response, but as well as a psychological response. The other part, the other 6 limbs of those 8 limbs of yoga all have to do with how we move throughout the world. For example, one has to do, the first one, which is part of the yamas and the niyamas, has to do with ethics. And the ethics are, how do you move throughout the world as you treat other people? The other one has to do with how do you move throughout the world ethically towards yourself? It's a really good format and context to talk about golf. So, one of the things that we always talk about with like the first tee is the first tee foundation is not just teaching golf, it's teaching kids how to be ethical, how to be considerate, how to, write down the real number on your scorecard, how to call a penalty on yourself. These are all things that we're teaching in yoga and yoga for golfers. The other thing is there's something that we talk about, which is when you think about ethics towards yourself too, what is your inner dialogue? A lot of golfers, and I can say this because I'm a golfer, right? But golfers tend towards a negative inner dialogue. Sometimes you'll walk off the golf course, and when you're sitting there having a beer with your friends, you're not always talking about the best shot. You're talking about the shot that just got away. Or the inner dialogue might be something like, I can never hit it over water, or my chipping is always terrible. Well, is that really the truth? If you can hit it over water and you've done it once on your course, you can do it again because it's inside there. Another one of the 8 limbs of yoga that we talk about is called one-pointed concentration. And this is a really important point for both golf and, as you know, I've been teaching yoga in Major League Baseball for 14 years. I work for 7 teams. And I would work with my pitchers a lot on this, which is, imagine if you're standing on the mound and there's 70,000 people. How do you move into that one-pointed concentration? And you know what? The pressure could be the same for a pitcher on the mound in front of 70,000 people as hitting it off the first tee in a pro-am. And, how do you create this one-pointed concentration? Another one of the 8 limbs of yoga is withdrawing from the senses. So how do you withdraw from this powerful external force, or maybe even the negative internal dialogue, to be fully present? And frankly, the way that I teach that is through the work of the breath.
I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. So we have the relation of the pitchers and the golfers. I think we've all kind of experienced this, no matter what level you play on in golf. I play in this little Ryder Cup every year with a bunch of my buddies, and it's like you're standing on the first tee box with 10 of your buddies standing around, and for whatever reason, it feels like the most important shot in the world, and you start to get that tension. I know guys have felt this in their club championships or in an amateur event. So how do you kind of go into that one-pointed concentration? I know you said kind of withdrawing the senses and using the breath. Let's kind of dig into these pieces a little bit more and some of the strategies that you use maybe with your pitchers or with your golfers.
Well, when I'm talking about the use of the breath, there is the physiological response of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, or heightened, I should say, and that happens very often because people hold their breath and they don't know how to take a long, deep, diaphragmatic breath. What happens is it sends your nervous system into basically a fight or flight response. Like you said, you're playing in that Ryder Cup situation with your buddies and you feel like it's the most important shot. Well, what happens is the heart starts to race. It actually affects your cognitive capabilities. So it would affect course management when the sympathetic nervous system is aggravated. And so what I teach my golfers and my pitchers is to take a long, slow, deep breath in through the nose, and then a long, slow, cleansing breath out of the nose. And you want to feel the tension leaving your body, starting with your traps, moving into your arms and your hands. And it should really be part of your pre-shot routine. Before you begin your takeaway, you should incorporate this type of breathing. And it's the fastest way that you can take the nervous system and just, boom, drop it down into a more parasympathetic nervous state so that your body is then free. It's free of tension, because a body that's free of tension can move more efficiently. It needs to eccentrically load more efficiently so that it can concentrically explode. And a body that has tight muscles and a tight mind and a racing heart cannot do that.
And so how do obviously this is something that you can start practicing today, but how do you get good at this?
Yes.
Because, we've all come across those situations where you try to do your breathing, but is there a way to consistently practice this? Obviously, I would imagine, in the yoga sessions, that's what you do too.
Yeah.
But what's the best way for somebody to really get good at this?
Well, certainly practice makes perfect, right?
Right.
if you're practicing perfectly, this is what we teach on the yoga mat. We teach, for example, all of my sessions, whether it be with baseball or golfers, always start out with breathing. We want to get the diaphragm in the proper position. And even if it's something that you could just start by lying on your back, if you take your fingertips and place them along your rib cage, the shoulders are relaxed, and you want to take an inhalation for 5, an exhalation for 5, then do an inhalation for 5, exhalation for 5, hold for 3. And if you continue to do that, what you'll start to feel is you'll feel movement in your diaphragm, which is where the lungs are, obviously. But a lot of people breathe incorrectly because they breathe up into their traps and into their scalenes. Actually, the scalenes are actually attached to the diaphragm in terms of the movement pattern, is what I meant to say. So it's even if you start with something as simple as lying on your back and doing that practice that I just did, even if you do it for 3 minutes or a round of 10 breaths that I just described, that's how you can first start to create that awareness of how your breathing pattern works. Now, secondly, in the yoga for golfers or yoga for baseball stuff that I do, what I'll do is, let's say we're going to do a warrior 3 pose, where a warrior 3 pose is where let's say you step your right leg forward, you bend your right knee, you load up your right glute, and you hinge your upper body down and your left leg up, right? So it's like a teeter-totter. So what I'll do is I will give the instruction, if you will, the mechanics of the pose on the first side. And I'm instructing about breathing. On the second side, I have my athletes do it on their own. And the reason I do that is really 3 points. Number one, I want them to be responsible for their own breath. And I want them to take responsibility for their own yoga practice. If I'm constantly telling them what to do, then they're just waiting for the cue from me. And then the second thing is they don't learn to trust themselves. So this is something that we see a lot in golf, and we do see it in baseball too, where somebody might throw a bad pitch, or if they have a bad round, the first thing they do is they run to the golf pro for the quick fix because they're not taking responsibility for their own experience. And the other thing is that when I allow them to experience the second side on their own, then again, they count their own breaths. They can see how their breath might become erratic if they're pushing too hard, if they're not in this place of kind of quietness, this one-pointed concentration. It cultivates all of those skills that we talked about in the beginning of our discussion. And then when you learn that from doing this yoga practice, you immediately know how to take it out onto the course or onto the field because you've already been doing it.
Well, and I would imagine you could even take that, the different patterns that you learn in the different yoga positions. You could even start working on this stuff like in your car when you're driving to work or.
Oh, totally.
I mean, just kind of, I think sometimes we get so situated in the mindset that I'm going to go to yoga and I'm going to work on my breathing, or I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work on exercising, as opposed to trying to tie some of this stuff in to our daily habits and our daily lives, and finding those little nooks and crannies where we can still kind of work on those different things. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making when you first give them that autonomy to kind of start taking control of or the responsibility of their breathing? What are the biggest mistakes that they make?
Well, one of the things that I see constantly with my athletes is they will start to clench their jaw. And when you have the temporomandibular joint, right, which is, this jaw, it's like it's like the most powerful muscle and, joint in the body because it has to mash your food, obviously. When the jaw is clenched, it sends the nervous system into that sympathetic state. So one of the things that I do is I'm always asking my guys to move their jaw around, to almost kind of open and close their jaw and make sure that their jaw is relaxed. Now, what you can do, too, this is a little trick. If you take the tip of your tongue and you put it on the inside of, like, where your top teeth meet the palate, the soft palate of your upper palate, you physically cannot clench your jaw. And the importance of keeping your jaw relaxed is so significant that this is something they do in baseball sometimes, is they'll put like a Dorito chip or like a potato chip in between, like in a pitcher's jaw, and can they pitch without breaking the potato chip?
Really? You have the guys pitching with either doing that or with a chip or something. So would you have a golfer do that too?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I always say this all the time to my baseball players. If it was up to me, I would put double bubble out of the baseball business because guys are just chomping, and it does have an impact on the nervous system. Back to that whole conversation about, the nervous system. And, let me just touch on that for a second. And this all ties back to breathing. I'm not saying in any way that your nervous system and your muscles and your mind should always be relaxed all the time. Because obviously in golf, just like baseball, we have to create explosive movement from a static position. But what I am saying, and also we're competitive, by the way, I'm a competitive athlete. I have been my whole life. And so I want to win, and I want to do the best that I can do every day, whether it be in my businesses or in my personal relationships or whatever it might be. So I'm competitive. What I'm saying is the starting point of that movement should be one of a relaxed state. And that is also back to the eccentric loading and concentric, exploding of muscles.
Right. Yeah, I think that, having everything in tune, being able to practice that and then be able to go from there. As you said, you have to have all these different senses and emotions and everything going on as you're in the height of competition. It's funny that you mentioned the double bubble thing, because we kind of have a rule in the gym that there's no chewing gum when you're lifting weights. And most people don't, when you try to explain to somebody that it's the neurological senses and things like that, they're like, what are you talking about? So we just tell them it's a choking hazard and we just have them spit it out. But, in the background, we know that that's a piece of it too, that your body is working on certain movements. And if you're intentional about those movement patterns, even those little distractions can actually play a role in what's going on with your body.
Yeah, and I think, what we're talking about here is we're talking about the subtle differences between being intentional with your movements, being purposeful with your practice, which is also something we teach in yoga, and having a goal, as opposed to just, I'll take it back to golf. Going to the golf course and just standing over 100 balls and hitting a 7-iron is, in my opinion, not practicing with purpose. Pia Nielsen and Lynn Marriott are very good friends of mine, Vision 54, and they are phenomenal at teaching this concept. But this is also the reason why when I'm teaching yoga for golfers, I will give instruction on side 1, and on side 2, because I want them to experience it themselves, and I want their practice to have their purpose, not my purpose.
Right.
The journey as a coach, I feel, is not about me. It's about how can I inspire my athletes to be the best that they can be. And, I just tell you, one of my favorite quotes about teaching and coaching is, a good teacher shows you where to look but doesn't tell you what to see.
Right. I think it was Greg Rose that I heard him say, you should never tell somebody what they should be feeling, because you can't feel what their body's feeling, but give them the instructions on what they're supposed to be doing, give them some different cues and things, but don't ever tell them, what you should be feeling. I have a question for you. When working with clients, and I'm sure that people listening to the show, as they're in the gym, sometimes they find themselves doing this. I notice, and I do this myself too. You get in a rhythm, you're in the gym, you're working out, and you almost start to kind of go through the motions. And we don't necessarily connect the intention of that movement or that muscle or whatever. How would you encourage somebody to go about, whether that be for the coach to help get their clients to have a little more purpose to each movement or exercise or whatever, or even the person listening that goes to the gym, they know what they need to do, they find themselves just kind of rushing through it. How would you address that with that person to give them a little bit more of a guide on being intentional with each exercise? Let me jump in here real quick to thank one of our featured sponsors for today's episode, which is Super Speed Golf. By now, you've probably heard that Super Speed Golf is the #1 completely dominant overspeed training device out on the market. We've got amateurs, we've got college players, we've got tour pros, over 250 tour pros using the Super Speed Golf system in order to not just improve the speed of your swing, but it does so many other things regarding balance, regarding timing, everything that you want in an overspeed training device. You can get it from superspeedgolf.com. It's basically a system of 3 different weights of clubs where you swing them systematically based on protocols, which you get from the guys at Superspeed, or you can develop your own protocols if you'd like. But it's a way to get your body and your swing moving faster without getting super technical, without working on all these little nitpicky positions and what's going on with your hands and everything. It just simply works on the athleticism in your body and teaches you how to swing a club faster, teaches your brain that you can actually swing faster than you are. So it's one of my favorite devices, one of my favorite training tools that I personally use for myself, for my clients, and I recommend to everyone in the 18 Strong community. Go check them out at superspeedgolf.com and be sure to use your code 18Strong to get a discount. Now let's get back to Katherine.
I would have them take a step back, take a breath, think about what are they trying to accomplish, and then step back into it. It's exactly like golf. When and I'll use myself as an example here, when I have to choose between a 3-wood and a 5-wood, and I have a 5-wood in my hand, but I know I really need a 3-wood, and I think, you know what, the heck with it. I'm just gonna stick with this club because I don't have the intention. Maybe I might have been thinking to myself, well, I don't usually make this shot anyway. or I don't have the commitment to excellence to just literally walk back to my bag and get the right club.
Right.
So, so I think it's important to take a step back and think about what you're trying to accomplish. This is the setting of the intention. I teach meditation with a lot of my players as well, both golf and baseball. And the meditation is a really key practice to being able to cultivate the proper mindset and be clear on your intention. In every yoga class, we always say that we are going to set an intention. I can tell you, too, that with my baseball teams, when we always practice breathing before we start the yoga for baseball practice, it's a very powerful tool when you have an entire team breathing together. If you have ever read Phil Jackson's book called 11 Rings, it's an excellent book that I highly recommend. And he talks about the power of a team breathing together and meditating together. It's incredibly powerful. Meditation does not have to be where you're sitting in a lotus position and, you're burning incense and you have to have this perfect posture, even though your knee is killing you because you can't sit cross-legged. The practice of meditation could be just in the morning, sitting in bed with your spine upright and your back against the headboard, and all you do is you just breathe for 5 minutes. That's where the meditation can start. And, one of the things that I love about golf so much is when I'm out there and I'm kind of in the zone and I'm, maybe I'm playing great, maybe I'm not playing so great, but I'm enjoying it and it's beautiful. Guess what? That's meditation. Mm-hmm. That's a walking meditation. And I can't stress enough the power of that for athletes and individuals.
Yeah, meditation is one of those things that I personally have struggled with trying, to quiet the mind and sit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. But I've noticed that over the time that I've tried to bring it in, I've gotten a little bit better, and it's one of my goals right now that I have written down to do a little bit more, on a weekly basis. But it's amazing to me, mm-hmm. The thing that I've learned from people like you and some of the other folks that I've talked about it is there's not a right way to do it, especially to start with it. It's all just about starting, right? So it's as easy as...
That's why I made the point. Go ahead.
It's as easy as just sitting there and just breathing for, basically kind of like the breathing you were talking about before, just working on the diaphragm and sitting there and breathing for 5 minutes, right? Just do it, and then you'll get better as you go.
Yeah, and it's not to be, you don't want to be in judgment around the practice of meditation. It's not like, oh, I can't quiet my mind. I'm thinking about the groceries and I have to finish up that email. The thoughts will come in. Thoughts are always coming in. But the way that I describe it with my athletes is, as you inhale, you just kind of visualize the body being filled with energy, and as you exhale, you just see the body releasing the tension. A thought might come in like a cloud or like a wave, and then you just let it go out. Right? It's an in and it's an out. It's a no judgment, but it's so critical to be able to clear the mind so that you can set the intention that's based in integrity. And we just go. I'll fully out myself. I'm a technology junkie. My phone is always wired to me. I have 3 computers. I love technology. But at the same time, if I don't take those 5 minutes every morning to just sit, I feel like my day is off to the races without my control. And the other thing is, when you mentioned this about the breathing, you can do it in the car. We have the opportunity at every moment with every breath to reset our intention and to make it more concrete with every breath.
I know that these days there's a lot of different, speaking of technology and being linked to your phone, there's a lot of different either apps or resources. Do you guys have a resource for meditation, or do you have one that you might recommend to people just to get them started if they've never tried this?
I really don't. It's a very good question. I don't. There are a lot of meditation apps out there. Ones that can just kind of walk you through a guided meditation, which I think is a good way to start. And it's funny you mentioned that because I'm getting ready to create some MP4 files that will be guided meditation. I've done that for my baseball teams, but I have not done it for the golf community yet. And so that's something that we're planning on doing in the next couple of weeks. So that will be eventually available on my website. But I think, it's just do it, just start, and don't, like I said, give yourself a break. There's no perfect way to do it. The imperfect way to do it is to not do it.
Right. That's what I always found myself is kind of beating myself up for doing it wrong. And why can't I get my brain to shut off? And, these thoughts would come in, but knowing that that's okay and just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Are there any?
Absolutely.
What did we miss as far as the 8 limbs? And I know I kind of jumped in and started poking you with questions on a couple things. Is there anything in there that we missed as far as the 8 limbs were concerned?
Well, I think one of the final 8 limb, number 8, is called samadhi, and the translation is enlightenment. And the ancient yoga sages have their own interpretation of enlightenment, but I think that for the average Western individual, that sense of enlightenment would just be that sense of peace, of calm, where things are flowing, where you're in a space of acceptance. I think acceptance, I heard Hank Haney say this. I've taught a lot with Hank, and one time one of the players in the golf school we did said to him, what do you think is Tiger's greatest strength? And Hank said he understands the concept of acceptance, and he never thinks about the last shot again. And I think that's something that has stuck with me that I share a lot. When you've had a 3-putt and you're walking to the next tee box and you're all pissed and your head is down and you've got a C posture going and your diaphragm is contracted, you're not having that much fun. And it's also not good for your body, and it's not good for you mentally. So what I coach my athletes to do is if you've had a bad shot, or maybe it was a pitch that didn't come out the way that you intended, just take a nice deep breath again. On the exhalation, relax your jaw and just be in a place of acceptance and just let it go.
It's so hard to do, isn't it?
Well, of course it's hard to do, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it just because it's hard.
Right. That's a great point. That's an excellent point. All right, I want to, so we're kind of talking almost the mobility of the mind here. That's what I'm going to maybe label this episode as, the mobility of the mind. But I know that you have talked a lot about, even with yoga and obviously working on these intentional components and working on your body and being able to do what you want it to do. How does this, we talked about the chain reaction biomechanics earlier, and I know that's a lot of big words, and it all kind of ties into this as far as what are you doing in these sessions, what are you working on, and how is that really going to affect the total outcome. So can you kind of steer us in that direction a little bit of why we have to be so intentional with some of these different movements and practices, and then how that ends up kind of relating into our golf game?
Well, I have a fellow degree in chain reaction biomechanics, and it's one of I believe, the biggest point of differentiation from what a lot of other yoga instructors do. Because I look at movement as a chain reaction. And for example, when I assess my players, the first thing I do is I assess their gait. Because as you walk is as you move is as you swing. And I can almost tell at this point, from doing this for so many years, I can almost tell what's going to happen in a golfer's swing based on how they walk. So in the world of chain reaction biomechanics, everything is connected. So for example, when my calcaneus strikes, if I'm stepping with my right foot, my calcaneus is going to strike the ground. There's a chain reaction up into the subtalar joint, all the way up the body as I propel myself forward. And then as my trail leg comes, there's a chain reaction biomechanics to what has to happen when the left leg is now propelling forward just to walk. Now, in yoga for golfers and the way that we teach, and this is also in the kinematic sequence in golf, everything starts in the feet. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So when you look at, three-dimensional motion analysis, we know that the kinematic sequence starts in the feet. Well, if I have an athlete that has pronated arches, flat feet, and the chain reaction biomechanics from their feet is affecting what's happening in their thoracic spine, then I know when I'm formulating the yoga for golfers or yoga for baseball methodologies that I'm going to do with them, I'm going to do a lot of standing postures so that I can start to work on their foot function from their feet to their hips to their T-spine, on and on, just like the kinematic sequence. So all of the sequencing that I do is based on chain reaction biomechanics, but it's also based on triplane motion. So my sequencing doesn't typically just go from, like, let's say, sagittal plane motion, only sagittal plane motion. I'll do sagittal to frontal to transverse, yes.
Can you kind of break that down more into layman's terms so the audience understands what sagittal and triplane is? I know that sometimes, us fitness pros, we start talking in these different directional components and don't necessarily understand what direction that is.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So the sagittal plane is any time that you're in flexion or extension, any part of the body that's in flexion or extension, okay? The frontal plane is lateral bending as well as adduction and abduction, meaning away from the midline or into the midline, okay? So if I'm standing up right now, which I'm doing, if I take my right leg and I take it out to the side in the lateral plane of motion, right? So the abduction is moving away from my body. The adduction is bringing my leg back in towards my body. Transverse plane motion is anything having to do with rotation, any type of rotational movement. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So when you look at the golf swing, in the golf swing, even if you're just talking about your address position, okay, you have many, many parts of the body, starting with your ankle, that are in the sagittal plane of motion, right? So my torso is hinging forward, my ankle is flexed, my knees are flexed in this forward position. But now I might also want to, let's say I want to drop my right shoulder a little bit. So now my right shoulder is moving in the frontal plane, and then I'm going to start to rotate everything in my body into the transverse plane. Well, by the way, do you know the 3 most challenging positions for your lumbar are?
What are they?
When you're in flexion, lateral bending, and rotation, causes the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most force on your lumbar spine. So if you think about the golf swing, what is it? It's all of these things that we just talked about at once in an explosive movement in under 2-second period of time.
Right.
This is why a lot of golfers have low back issues. So our methodologies work in this triplane chain reaction biomechanical perspective. And it's very different from going to a yoga class and doing a down dog.
Right. Yeah, you have to take into account all these different pieces. And when we look at the golf swing, you think, oh, it's just swinging the body around. It's really a very difficult position and movement for the body to take on, and it's not great for our bodies. So if you're not preparing yourself for that in some way and looking at these different things, I mean, you're really kind of waiting for something bad to happen. If you're not preparing your tissue for all of these loads, something's eventually going to break down.
Absolutely. And, the thing that I love about what I do is we might be having, for me personally, both in golf and baseball, we have athletes that come to me because maybe, they need more turn or whatever it might be. What I really love about what I get to be able to do every day, and I feel so blessed to do this, is I might be able to help that guy get more turn, more load, more power. I can help him get more focus, have more clear intention, to have more energy because I'm teaching him how to breathe. But what I really love is when a guy comes to me and says, hey, you know what? I can stand on one foot and put my shoe on now. Or I don't have to use the mirrors to back my car out of the driveway now. I can actually turn around. And I think that I spent a lot of time and maybe too much talking about the performance piece. But for me, it's like, how can I help my athletes both on and off the course or the field? Because this is life.
Yeah, that's such a great point because, we all do this stuff with the intention of, getting better at sport or, getting in better shape. But what does it really boil down to? And I think you're right. And we've talked about that so many times on the show is if you're not getting yourself in better shape to be a human, to do human things, first of all, you're in trouble already. But when you do these things, and maybe it is, maybe the only reason you go to the gym is because you want to hit a ball farther. But the benefits are exactly what you're talking about. Those simple little things, picking up your grandkid, or being able to go and play soccer or softball with the guys or something like that too. Just simple little things that you kind of forget about that also bring a lot of enjoyment into your life.
I'll tell you when you know that you are not doing, when you're unaware of the benefits off the, let's say, the field or the course, is when you lose the ability to do it. Yes, I just had that conversation with That's when it becomes powerful.
Just had that conversation this morning with a client, and he's around 50 years old or so, and he said, man, there's so many things that I took for granted before, just like even hearing or being able to squat down. He's like, you just don't you don't realize that if one day you're not going to be bulletproof, and you're going to start feeling these things, and then you're going to say, damn it, I wish I would have done X in order to prevent some of that stuff. So I think that's so on point.
It's so true. And you know what? My mother is in her 80s, and she works out with a trainer at the gym 3 days a week. And the thing that she has always told me my whole life is never stop moving.
We work with too many people that stopped moving and are trying to move again. In their 50s, 60s, 70s. I have a gentleman that I've talked about on the show several times. His name's Art. He sat at a desk for about 50 years straight, I think. And he's the greatest guy, comes in, does everything that I'll ask him to do, does everything I ask him to do at home. But, he's so stiff and tight that he's regretting the fact that he didn't put this time in a long time ago. I was going to ask you what you're personally working on yourself right now, because part of Mobility May was we had people shoot videos and say, what's the one thing that they're working on and kind of commit to doing this mobility drill or working on this. What's something that Katherine Roberts, yoga master, is currently working on herself?
I don't have any physical problems. What are you talking about, Jeff? I'm perfect.
Perfect. That's kind of the answer that I was expecting, but let's just pretend.
No, that's not true. That is not true. I'm a human being. Oh, my goodness. Well, it's funny, for the Mobility May piece that I sent, I talked a lot about hip mobility because I do a lot of traveling. I teach all over the world, so I'm on airplanes all the time. And I got to tell you, if I can meet the guy that designed the airplane seats, I'm going to have a major word with that dude, because it's not good for your body. So one of the things that I'm personally working on is more hip mobility. Especially, I'm a bit imbalanced. I'm a right-handed golfer, and I have been playing golf most of my life, and I've spent a lot more time loading my right side than to my left side, so my right hip is tighter than my left. So I work on that. The other thing that I work on a lot, too, for the same reasons, my travel schedule is very often I'll feel like I have a very tight thoracic spine. So I work on a lot of thoracic spine extension and rotation. Because I don't want to be the person that's walking with my head down with, a C posture and kyphotic upper back. So,
yeah, I think when people see your Mobility May video, they're not going to believe you that you have tight hips because of the drill that you show on there. So, just a little forewarning there. But no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you sending that video too. It was it made me hurt in places that I know I don't have that motion. What's next for you? What projects do you have going on? I know you're always working on something new, working on improving something, making something new for the golfers to help us play better golf. So what's the latest project?
Yeah, we're working on a whole new series of videos. We launched 2 new videos online back in late February. But we're still working on new content, crafting new content, working on more downloads, having to do with the meditation and the mental side. Just from the yoga perspective, I'm not professing to be a sports psychologist, but I have been working with athletes in this capacity for 20 years. So that, and, always updating the website. What I wanted to share with the listeners is if you've never done yoga and you know that maybe if it's just something as simple as the flexibility, hopefully after this conversation, you'll know that you'll get much, much more out of it than just a good stretch. We have something on the website called the Golfer's Profile, and it's on the upper right-hand corner of my website. If you click onto that, what it does is it will ask you, I think it's 15 questions. Everything from what are your strengths and challenges on the golf course, both from the physical performance side and mental side. Asks you some general fitness questions, how much time do you have to warm up before when you get to the course, how many rounds do you play, etc. And this is all free, by the way. When you go on and you take the Golfer's Profile, instantly what will happen is you will be sent a series of 10 video tips that are based on your personal response. So for some of the listeners out there, if they're thinking that they want to try this, but they're not really sure, they can take the Golfer's Profile and just get a sample of some of the things that I do. Also, all of our content is digital, so everything is an instant download. So you can you'll be able to take me to the course with you, take me traveling with you. And those have been really, really successful. The other thing is that we have continued to expand our certification program. It's both available in person and online. And we have certified teachers in 26 countries at this point. So it's pretty exciting to be able to have this global presence and to be helping people all over the world is really quite a blessing.
It's so amazing. And I love that tool that you have. I've gone through there. Now you guys can have your own Katherine Roberts in your pocket on your phone. You can take her to the course, take her to the gym, wherever you want. Now, Katherine, I have to say that you have done so much for not just the world of golf, but just, sports and just fitness in general with all the resources you put out there, all the people that you work with, all the certified yoga instructors that you have. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of us fitness professionals and everybody here at the 18 Strong community.
Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, absolutely. And you're obviously one of my favorite people to, we've run into each other multiple times at different locations, fitness summits, PGA shows, and I love just sitting and chatting with you. So one of my favorite persons in the world of golf. Have to ask you one question that I didn't get to ask you the last time you were on the show. I think we asked the Caddyshack and Happy Gilmore. I'm pretty sure you said Caddyshack. You tried to throw Tin Cup in there, which is not allowed. What would, since you work with so many baseball players, major leaguers, if golf was like baseball and you had a song playing when you walk to the tee box, just like baseball players do when they walk to home plate, what is Katherine Roberts' song?
AC/DC. You shook me all night long.
AC/DC. All right. I love it. Can't go wrong with a little AC/DC and a little hard rock. All right, young lady, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure, as I mentioned. And everybody knows that to go to the show notes to get their information on how they can connect with Yoga for Golfers and everything that you're doing. Any last words of advice for us?
Just do it. Just do it. Get out there, challenge yourself, focus on the body and the mind as one piece, and be in acceptance and just enjoy the journey.
I love it. All right, Katherine, we will talk to you very soon. Take care.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, I want to thank Katherine one more time for coming on the show. And if you want any more information on Katherine, on Yoga for Golfers, or you want to go and check out their individual profile that she was talking about on their homepage, you can find all of her information in the show notes page at 18strong.com. Just look up Katherine Roberts. This is episode number 141. You can find it all there. Be sure to check out the PGAtour.com and look at the new player profile pages that they've got set up, and check out the Overspeed system, Super Speed Golf. If you haven't done it yet, you're going to thank me once you're swinging 10 miles per hour faster and hitting the ball by your buddies. So that's superspeedgolf.com. Use the code 18strong. I appreciate you being here on the podcast every single week. We've got an incredible guest coming up, a super special guest for Mobility May coming up next week, so don't miss out on that one. And if you want to join in the conversation with us, go over to Facebook, join our private community, the 18 Strong Movement, where we kind of hang out and have cocktails and talk about golf and fitness and, have secret handshakes and stuff. So go on over there to the 18 Strong Movement and you'll find out what's going on. All right, we will talk to you next week. Train hard, practice smart, play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.